I distinctly remember feeling this aura surround me, just totally envelop me. And I started to crouch down, raise my hands up over my face, and lower my head. And everything went silent, when I was surrounded by, the breeze quit blowing, the leaves quit rustling, squirrels, birds, everything. Just total silence. And the hair stood up on the back of my neck. And then all of a sudden I just hear the boom.
Welcome to Going In Blind. I'm your host, Zach Tidwell, and today I'm speaking with Lonnie Bedwell, the first blind person to kayak all 226 miles of the Grand Canyon. He's also summited Mount Everest and 4 of the world's other tallest peaks. And recently, after summiting Mount Vincent in Antarctica, he cross-country skied all the way to the South Pole. And to everyone at home, thank you for listening. Please take a second to help me grow the show so that I can keep delivering these conversations week after week for years to come. Subscribe, rate, and review the show in whatever podcasting app you're using right now, and check out the show notes to follow me on social media and YouTube as well. When you share your favorite episodes, tag me and use the hashtag GoingInBlind. You can also join my mailing list at zachtidwell.net. And if you know someone you think I should talk to, have them send me an email at contact.goinginblind@gmail.com. Mr. Lonnie Bedwell, welcome to the show, fella.
Yeah, thank you, man. How's life treating you?
It's going. It's hanging to the little left, or a little to the left.
Still skinny?
Like some other things. Yeah, yeah, still skinny. But dude, everyone heard the very first episode was with Joe Mornini, who obviously but I'm saying that for people at home. You reached the South Pole while we were recording that interview. I don't know if you've listened to it, and ever since then, people have been bugging me like, when are you to get this Lonnie guy on? When are you to get Lonnie on? And so glad it's finally happening. But before we get into things here, will you, in a not super humble way like you do everything else, tell everyone a little bit about yourself, especially your accomplishments over the past 30 years here?
Oh, wow. Well,
Well, like since you've lost just the big ticket items since you've lost your sight, so that people get a
yeah,
little background.
yeah. Yeah, well, I refer to myself as LOL, which is lights out Lonnie, completely, like yourself, completely lights out blind. And just to kind of start, after I lost my eyesight, I got into building houses, something I didn't do before I lost my eyesight. And I don't know how many houses I've built now, garages, decks, and do anything from the ground up, framing, sheeting, wiring, roofing, you name it. It's kind of cool, but got to do that. And then once, I actually ended up as a single dad too, raising my girls. So I didn't go to a blind rehab center until my youngest daughter graduated high school, and then I got introduced to adaptive sports, and then just happened to be given the opportunity to be the first blind person to kayak the entire length of the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon in my own kayak. The Batoka Gorge section of the Zambezi River over in Africa, along with, I think, the New and Gully Rivers in West Virginia. I don't know, some others around. I'm currently attempting to complete what they call the Explorer's Grand Slam, and that's to climb the highest peak on all 7 continents and then ski or trek to the North and South Pole. It's got 5 of the 7 summits at this point, including Mount Everest. And then I've also skied to the South Pole, like I said already. So I've got Mount Elbrus and in Europe, and Carson's Pyramid over in Australia plate to go to finish that slam. And also the first blind person to climb Devil's Tower, which is our nation's first national monument out in eastern Wyoming. So just crazy
No big
blessed with
deal.
opportunity, man. Crazy blessed with opportunity. So
No big deal. But I think, I had told you before we started, like, I'm going to introduce you. And then I realized, like, okay, there's too many things there I want you to do. I thought you wouldn't do yourself justice because you're always so humble with everything. But I also wanted to point out, I mean, you played such a huge role in my life, especially early on when I lost my sight. And even, I mean, you were there for me through some of the nastiness with the alcoholism and everything else. But you've had such an impact on so many other not even just veterans, but people who have lost their sight and have gone out of your way to do that, even though you kind of stumbled your I guess, stumbled upon a lot of these opportunities. I mean, this is something outside of all the public speaking and the adventuring that you do, you spend so much of your time being able to help other people not have to have such a rough go and also get access to these opportunities that wanted to make sure everyone is aware of that because yes, there's all of these incredible things that you're doing, but a lot of this is also happening behind the scenes and it's not stuff that you get credit for outside of our small community. So you're totally
Yeah, I mean,
blind. Go ahead.
I was gonna say that, you know, I kinda when I lost when I got shot and lost my eyesight, that ended my military career, so I kinda take what you're talking about as my next duty assignment, my next mission, if you will, and, you know, it's just crazy the opportunities I've been given, so I do, spend a lot of time trying to create other opportunities, you know, or create opportunities for others, excuse me, and, yeah, I distinctly remember, quite frankly, the Grand Canyon, kayaking the Grand Canyon was probably the first big thing that I'd done.
Can I pause you here so
Yes.
we can work back through this so that people get an understanding of everything and have some more context?
Yeah.
Okay. So you were in the Navy, you had normal sight. You're totally blind now. You had normal vision and were active duty. How long were you active duty?
I was active duty for 9 years and I rode submarines for a living, and then I rolled over into the Naval Reserve and then over into the Army National Guard. Um, so I had a total of 12 years in.
Okay. And I think the kind of person that it takes to willingly decide to spend months at a time in a metal tube with a bunch of other men is probably speaks to some of where this mental mode that you have to take on some of these things that you've taken on comes from. But so while you were in the reserves is when you lost your sight.
Yes. The
And
Guard, the National Guard is when,
okay.
yeah. Yeah.
You want to, this was a hunting accident, which is you, so the first time that I met you this was 8.5 months after I shot myself. And, I tell people a lot about like I was snowboarding 8.5 months after I shot myself. And you secured me a spot on that trip. And also something that I talk about all the time, something that I've written about in my book, like this very distinct turning point in my own progression was, I think that first night that we were there at the Adaptive Sports Center in Crested Butte, you and I sat down at the table and we were actually getting to know each other a little bit. And you told me about your story of losing your sight and the way that you were able to share it because at that point I wasn't able to talk about anything that had happened with my ex-wife, and I especially was not able to talk about anything that surrounding my suicide attempt because I was ashamed. I think because I had lost all of my independence, and then it was so fresh, and I didn't know how to talk about it. And I told you that I was like, I'm getting these horrible reactions from people because I'll beat around the bush, try not to tell people, and they'll be like, so. How'd you lose your sight in Iraq? And I'd be like, no. And be like, was it Afghanistan? I'll be like, no, I didn't see combat. Both of my deployments were peacetime deployments. And they're like, oh, so, whatever. They throw something else out and then I'd be like, oh, I shot myself in the face. And I'd get a bad reaction. And I told you that. And then you walked me through your story, and the way that you were able to do that was so striking to me. Like I went home, I went back to my room that night and was like, I want to start being able to be open, like Lonnie is, and you have this sense of humor when you tell it. And can you tell everyone that story and about that day and the hunting accident, and we can kind of go from there?
Yeah, I absolutely can. I absolutely can. But I do want to say one thing though that I remember about our conversation that I think is important for everybody, in my opinion too, is you remember me telling you, said
Yes.
own it, because once you own it, it does not own you, and I think that's key to everybody. Let's just own where you're at. There's nothing we can do about it. Things happen. We sometimes do things, or like I said ourselves, some mistakes happen. Life happens. Just own it and then go on. But to your point, for me that day, it's on is a May the 4th. It's a Sunday morning, and me and my buddy Tim had been turkey hunting the day before, where I harvested my first turkey. And so I went out Sunday morning with him just to simply call for him. And we intentionally separated with the intent of working our way back together. And I'm not sure how it truly happened. I don't know either one of us truly know how it happened. It's dense and thick, but I was just, like I said, out there calling, kind of working way slowly. And then all of a sudden, I distinctly remember feeling this aura surround me, just totally envelop me. And I started to crouch down, raise my hands up over my face, and lower my head. And everything went silent, when I was surrounded by, I mean, the breeze quit blowing, the leaves quit rustling, the squirrels, birds, everything. I mean, just total silence. It was just, and the hair stood up on the back of my neck. And then all of a sudden I just hear the boom and I end up on my belly. Um, I think it literally backflipped me, and probably some due to the reaction of me jumping away from being shot. And I think they said I took a full shotgun blast to the face at about, I think they said 9 steps. And I just distinctly remember getting up off my belly onto my knees and reaching up to wipe my eyes because I thought I just had something cover my face. And, my head was ringing and pounding. But I took my gloves off and I reached up and wiped them again. And at that point, I could feel the contents of my eyes, or blood or whatever it was running down my hands. And I knew what had happened.
Did you see at all at that point? Do you remember?
No, total lights
Okay, it
out,
was
just
already
instant,
gone. Yeah.
instant. Yeah. And, the funny part about it, I no more saw him with the gun than he saw me. When he said he was shooting at a turkey, and, just assumed that he was. It just happened to be somehow between us or whatever. But um, right initially, I could talk, just barely. And, he ran over and looked at me, and started to pick me up and throw me on his shoulder. And I'm like, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm going to carry you out of here." And keep in mind, he was a Navy corpsman attached to Marine Recon Unit when he was on active duty. And then he was currently in it was a emergency room nurse,
They're extremely qualified to handle this.
extremely qualified. And but and he said, "I'm going to carry you out of here." I said, "You can't carry me out of here." He said, "I got to." He said, "You'll be dead before I get back." And I said, "The only chance I got is for you to put me down." And so he leaned me against a tree. By this time, my mouth just started filling up and I couldn't talk anymore. And he took his finger, cleared my airway, and he just ran for help. And I just sat there for a little bit and just started burning the images of my daughter into my mind and everything. And just, you know, struggling a little bit to breathe. So I ended up, couldn't clear my airway with my finger anymore. And I was fortunate enough to kind of feel around, and I found a little bush, and I broke one of the little stems off the bush and started shoving that stem down my throat to clear my airway.
Probably very familiar to being on a submarine.
And I uh, I started just getting weaker and weaker, and so I reached down, I just scooped up this pillow of leaves, if you will, and I laid down, and I just wanted to make sure I could keep my head above my feet, and I just struggled. I knew if I passed out, I wasn't going to make it because I just constantly had to clear my airway with that stem, and finally it got to the point where blood kind of clotted enough or something. I don't know. It's where I mean, there was literally a point there where I just left the stem and just pulled it out, but
Oh my
where
gosh.
I couldn't, literally I couldn't move. I was just getting so weak, and and I was just like I said, no, if I passed out, I was done. So about 45 minutes went by, and I could hear the sirens coming at a distance, because we was out in the middle of Stripper Hills back here, and I heard the sirens get closer in the park, and then I finally heard people come and yelling my name, and they was running past me, and I couldn't get up. I just had no strength to get up, and I thought I was yelling, but I couldn't make a sound, and really, and all of a sudden I heard another person stop right in front of me, literally right in front of me. And I was like, oh, they finally found me, and they just stood there. And come to find out, it was the guy that shot me. It was his first cousin, and those two guys were my best friends growing up my entire life. And so I thought I was yelling like as loud as I could, and he said it sounded like a whimpering puppy. And then when he heard that, he went down, and he told me later. He said when he saw me there, he just knew that I wasn't alive. So, but once he heard me, he started screaming that he found me, and they, finally people come around me, threw me in a stretcher. They carried me across the Stripper Hills down to this lake, put me in the boat, and by this time my dad arrived, and he jumped in the boat with me and started across the lake. And like I said, I couldn't speak or nothing, but I got enough of his attention, and I flipped him off. And the reason I did that is my dad's nickname is Birdie, and for that reason, and he doesn't do that to people he doesn't like. That's his own personal way of saying hello. So that's how I got the nickname. So I did that, and he told me later when I did that, he knew that I was still in my head. So they finally got us to an ambulance after we got off the lake, put me in the ambulance. The ambulance took me up to the Ball Diamond, local Ball Diamond up here, and helicopter was there, and they put me in the helicopter. And I just remember on the way, raising up off the helicopter, and they intubated me at that point. And next thing I remember, I woke up just getting out of surgery, an initial surgery just to kind of stop all the bleeding and all that good stuff. And yeah, and that's
Yeah.
kind of
Was
what
was
happened that day.
was your throat actually hit, or was that from all the blood draining down through your sinuses and
It,
everything
they
else?
they did a little bit of rebuilding on part of my throat, and and did some on my sinuses and stuff. So yeah, I couldn't speak for like I think like a day and a half or something like that, and then I got to where I could talk and stuff. So
Jeez.
yeah,
I don't think we've ever actually talked about this, and I know, I mean, you've probably only told me your story the one time, so I guess that would make sense. But are you spiritual? Like when you talk about that aura, I mean
I
that's
am. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
that's a surreal. Have you have you ever had any other experiences outside of that one where you've had that presence or where that I guess that whatever that aura was revisit, whether that was when you're in a sticky spot on the river. I mean, you had a pretty sketchy go on Mount Everest. I mean, in times like that.
Nothing to that extent, if you will.
Okay.
But like I said, you know, you, I wrote the book and myself and tell the story about to my daughter just a couple of months after the accident. My daughter, Bug, helping me to mow around the barn. But I distinctly remember, like I said, so that's the first time I walked outside the house by myself that day. And, after, getting a broomstick and walking outside and getting down to the barn, anyway, I ran into her, and, just fighting back these tears because I couldn't get into my little barn. And, she asked me, she said, Daddy, what's wrong? And I said, well, I'm just a little frustrated. She stomped her foot and, why are you frustrated? And deep in her voice. And I said, well, it's because I can't get into my barn without walking through chest high weeds. I can't see to mow them. And then she said, I'll help you, Daddy. I'm like, what? He said, I'll help you.
And she's a
And at
little
that,
girl.
yeah, she's 5 years old at the time,
Yeah.
and I'm like, you're five, I'm blind. There's no way, and I'm supposed to be helping you, not you helping me. And what if you get hurt? And what if I can't? And as I stood there with all these what ifs going through my head, I mean, just as plain as we're talking right now, the words, trust me, you can do it, trust me. She didn't say it, but I heard it as plain as we're talking right now. And so it's just another one of those experiences of, okay, okay, I'll trust you.
Yeah. I've
And
I've I've read your book twice and I don't remember it. Like I remember that experience, and I know you've told me about that because I've asked you about your kids a lot and we've talked about them, and I know they've been at such a huge role for you, and especially like because that was Bug, right?
yes,
Yeah. So I just it's interesting now. I've had aside from I had a self-proclaimed prophet on for one of the episodes, and I truly believe that guy is just a scam artist that was bullshitting. But I had a guy recently on whose name was Tony Lynch, and he was talking about an experience he had where he believes it was God, but again, voice where nothing was said out loud, but he heard it like he's hearing or like you're hearing me talk right now.
right,
And there's been one or two other people that I've had on, I believe Guy Zuck and then Ross Izzard from for some of these former episodes where it's like similar experience like that. And it's interesting. I mean,
yeah,
and like for you, you hinted at it, and I want to make sure it's reiterated here. You kind of hinted at it when you introduced yourself a little bit. But for people at home, like when I shot myself after I was stable in the hospital and all that stuff and came home, I went to a blind rehab center to basically go to school to learn how to be blind for 2.5 months. You mentioned you did not have any of that, and so at this point, you mentioned this is a couple months afterwards. You've been at home just kind of twiddling your thumb because you didn't know or have the skills or know hadn't been introduced to anything about how to be blind, right?
right, right.
Yeah.
And for me too, I mean, I literally went from weighing 182 pounds to 129 pounds, drinking Ensure shakes like they were candy, and just extreme severe eye pain and headaches. And uh, so, that's took me kind of that 2 months to, believe it or not, they literally discharged me 3 days after I went into the hospital when I got shot the first time. The nurses were beside themselves, but there were so many people at the hospital. I mean, every single one of my aunts, uncles, cousins made it from all over the United States to the hospital within 24 hours, and just friends galore. So I was just like, okay. I was just started joking instantly in hospital and with what I could, and because I didn't want them, I didn't want to let them down. I just wanted to build them up and stuff. So I was in no shape to come home, but the doctor was like, "Well, look what he's doing," and sent me home. And I was home 24 hours, and after that, and my body just absolutely crashed. And so I ended up going back to the hospital for another, I think, 11 days or something like that. And
Still, though, that is so short.
yeah, yeah, I had like 85 pellets up in there somewhere. I think they said some of them still naturally stomach, some of them still can. I think I got 3 in my pituitary gland, I believe is what they told me. And I took out some teeth and yeah, but my dad tells everybody when I got shot, he said the only thing it could have taken is my eyesight because there's nothing else in between my ears. So
Well, and the missing teeth fits right in with where
yeah,
you're at in the middle of Indiana. So,
IR1.
yeah. No, dude, your dad, I wish there was a way to do your dad some justice here to convey how ornery and just I don't know, your dad's awesome. I met Mr. Bedwell out visiting you one time, and that like you flipping him the bird is perfect for
Yeah,
it fits his personality, even if it wasn't his nickname. But how long? I mean, like you get out of the hospital, it's a couple weeks of you, and I remember you like having that or describing having this moment of like, okay, it's time to get up off the couch.
yeah.
Was
Like I
that
said, it was right at 2 months, and when I
okay?
finally quit losing weight and started to kind of build a little bit of strength back, if you will, for doing nothing. But it's like, yeah, get up. I was laying on my couch, left foot tapping the floor. I want to get up. Just get up and went to the handle, got the closet, excuse me, took the handle out of the broom, and
That was
out the
that
door I
day
went.
with
Yeah, that
Bug.
was
Oh,
that was that
okay.
day with Bug. Yeah,
And that so this happens. Obviously, that's one that is the initial step that is taken. From there, there's how many years in between that and Team River Runner was your big entry point into these huge things in the adaptive sports world, correct?
well, no, it was actually the Blind Rehab Center in Chicago. It was 14 years. It was 14 years before I went to a blind rehab center. And when I went up there, they heard the backstory of me building these houses, which I ought to tell you how I got into doing that here in a little bit. But
Yeah, go for that whenever, man.
yeah, but I had started, I was push mowing around my ponds and using the chainsaw all the time, cutting firewood and clearing fence rows. And so when I went up to that blind rehab center, they asked me, they said, Lonnie, we know blind people snow ski, but we've never done it here as a recreational outing. And we need to find something for these younger and other veterans to do when they come back from Iraq and Afghanistan. Will you be our guinea pig? I said, twist my arm. And that's how it started with the Adaptive Adventures. It was actually a thing up there. And then Kyle Thomas was another gentleman, had um, another foundation. It's been so long. People called Piece of Adventure, and took me up to the Apostle Islands, just in a big tandem or multi-person sea kayaks. But that led me to getting asked to do other opportunities. Actually, I don't know if remember William Murphy. Old Murph, he was asked by the Wounded Warrior Project, which I don't qualify for because I'm a pre 9/11 veteran. Um, he was asked by them up there at the Blind Rehab Center to go sailing, cycling, and water skiing. And he told them he wasn't going to go unless I went with him. And they told me, well, he's not qualified. He said, look, he's blind. You're not. If he comes, I'll go. So they called me up and they said, look, he won't come if you won't be here to support him. We'll bring you in as a special guest. Will you do it? And I said, absolutely, I'll be there. And um, I kind of, I remember that. That was kind of comical. But between those few events right there, I started getting asked to go do things. And so I went to the Winter Sports Clinic out in Snowmass, Colorado, and that's where I got introduced to Team River Runner. Just uh,
Oh, okay.
about 2 months after after being at Heinz, 2, 3 months after being at Heinz. So
So that all you went with 14 years of not 14 years of nothing. I mean, you you were working at the power plant and then doing the construction stuff, and I want to come back to those, but you went from 14 years of nothing and you just having adapted through figuring it out to all of a sudden this is like snowballing into this whole new
yeah,
world of and these huge opportunities for things.
yeah, yeah, for sure. The the home construction, how I got into that was, um, it's probably about 2 or 3 years into being blind, and no, it was more than that. It would have been. I started tearing down houses before that and doing some piddly stuff.
Was this
Uh,
post power plant?
this was kind of yeah post power plant because
Okay.
initially I went back to work at the power plant and
All right, so
you
tell
know they,
everybody about that and specifically what the experience that you write about in your book about
okay
this because that the
yeah
story
well
is insane.
yeah well I finally went back. I went they adapted the computers to where I could. It was with window eyes. They adapted the computers up there to where I could kind of monitor data online. I was shift supervisor at the plant up there, and a guy locally down here worked up there, so I'd ride to work with him. And there was 2 people actually I'd switch off with, and they never let me drive, unfortunately. But
Shocker. Did you tell me? Yeah, well, you didn't have your driving cane yet. That's why.
yeah, there you go. But I, like I said, they adapted the whole computer system to where I could kind of monitor some of the critical parameters of the plant. I couldn't do it real time. Well, it was real time, but I couldn't do it as fast naturally as a sighted person could. But I could still monitor the plant and see, kind of tell problems and stuff. But I was up there at the power plant. The one I think incident you're talking about was I was up there sitting in the supervisor's office, and then alarms just started going off, and I naturally couldn't keep up with them. And I walked out into the control center in the control room and started asking the people what was going on, and started having one guy sit right beside me and just give me instantaneous data. So tell me this, anything I ask. And so I started giving a little bit of directions to him. And by this time, the plant manager and operations manager came down to the control room as well. And I told them, I said, we're going to shut down. I said, listen, guys, we're going to shut down. We're going to shut down now. And we can't do it a standard way, with what was going on. So we can't do it normal. We're going to shut down. And the plant manager and operations manager both said, no, no, we're not. We're not going to shut down yet. And I said, yes, we are. Because if we don't, we're going to melt this plant down. They said, no. And I said, if I'm going to relinquish all responsibility to you right now unless we come down. And they were like, okay, go ahead and shut down. So I started describing to them exactly how to bring the plant down. And by the time we got it down and stuff, we had less than 5% of our cooling water left, or we'd have had a pretty good little meltdown within the coal gasification plant. And, the plant manager and operations manager was like, how in the world did you do that? And I said, well, I had these guys standing here real time. I said, I helped build this place. I knew it like the back of my hand. And so that was pretty cool feeling, and to do that. So
And like like a freaking savant standing there like orchestrating this thing because you're so I would imagine you're probably almost more in tune with some of those readouts than those guys are because you have to pay deliberate attention to them.
yeah. And then, like I said, when I built it, and quite frankly, a big part of that was the experience in the military and being on the submarine. All these, you know how it is when you're in the military. You do drills, just drills and drills and drills, and then you're doing your missions, and you're still, all the missions, and just all these drills. Just everything gets beat into your head. This attention to detail and the importance of it. So there's a couple other guys up there that were military. And I mean, we'd sit down and read tech manuals, and we created the operating procedures for this entire plant. It was our procedures based on reading these tech manuals and stuff. And quite frankly, when they started new equipment, they had us doing it, looking at all these pressure, velocity, temperature diagrams, all these flow diagrams, and had them up real time and watching it. And I'd not forget that. There's another incident when I did have my eyesight, though, was starting up this compressor, and I was just monitoring everything. And, um, I tripped it offline, and the engineer was just furious. And I said, "There's something wrong here. It's not right." And he said, "That's why there's safety. Let the safety trip it." I said, "I ain't letting the safety trip it." You know, and uh, I started going into the office and I started drawing all these diagrams and everything. And he's like, "Where'd you learn that?" And I said, "In the military. I taught it. It's part of everything I did." Come to find out, they left some blanks when they were doing testing on this compressor. They left some blanks in some of the equalizing and balancing lines. And that compressor, if the safeties had blanks in them, it would have thrusted itself right through the casing and just had massive
Jeez,
explosion.
just like
So yeah,
bullet out of there.
yeah. So it's just that kind of stuff. I mean, so you know, uh, and the time in the military, I distinctly remember a stage in the military when I first started, everything was just chaotic, and like, am I ever going to learn this? To where then all of a sudden it's like flipping a light switch. Um, Everything seemed to go in slow motion, but I was moving faster than I ever did.
I mean, as you're
But
running through procedures on
yeah,
the
you're just
the
running through
boat.
procedures and doing
Yeah.
what you had to, on the submarine, just to, do, all these. It's just kind of uncanny how that happens, and just to stay calm and react properly. And I think
Slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
exactly, and I
Yeah.
think that helped me. Like I said, I think that helped me when I got shot. I think it helped me. I know it helped me at that time in the control room, with the operations manager and plant manager, and everyone's wanting to freak out, and I was just stand there and just do this. All right, now do this, and okay, wait a minute, now do this, and and so um, yeah, it's
Yeah. I've
just
I've
life.
never I've never actually stopped and thought about that. I think, I don't have any like normal world work experience. I had a couple months there after I got out of the Marines and was working at a hospital while I was going to school. But ever since then, it's been, me doing my own thing. But what you said about the drilling, we drill everything. And I would imagine that's every job in the military. But yeah, you don't have that in the civilian world where you're not there's no fuck games to like force people to do that stuff, so you don't get that level of competency. And if there's no investment in having skin in the game with that, then that's yeah, you're not going to have that same level of expertise or even familiarity with your equipment. That's a
Yeah. Yeah, we
uh,
never we never intentionally tripped the plan off down there, just to drill, just to teach people how to do these
yeah.
procedures like, and they did in the military. But well, I was gonna step back too to the building of the houses stuff. How I kinda, like I said, got into that. I've talked about it like 3 times now. Round and round we go. But I was sitting here in my house talking to my Aunt Donna on the telephone, and she was having a new home built. And I told her, I said, "Man, Aunt Donna," I said, "I wish that those guys would let me help them. I know I can do some of that stuff." Well, something I didn't know for 10 years is she told them about me being blind and asked them if they'd let me help on their house. And they turned her down, said, "No way, we can't let this blind guy do this. No way." And she told them, said, "Gentlemen, you don't understand. You will either give him a 2-week period to come over here and work. And if it works out great, he can continue helping on my house. If it doesn't, he'll understand. I'll understand. But you will give him a 2-week period, or I will pay the fines and the penalties, and you're going to be fired, and I'm going to find someone else to finish building my home." So they let me come over there and help them. And I worked with them guys for 14 years uh, before they shut down the plant. And I'll not forget, it was like, and it's the first week I worked with them. I was cutting drywall and helping him hang drywall on the ceiling, holding it up and stuff. And I made a cut and got over and held up and I asked Kenny, the guy I was working with at the time. He said, I said, "How's it look, Manny? Or how's it look, Kenny?" And he said, "Looks like a blind guy cut it." And I just cracked up. And
Oh.
he told me later, he said, "Thank God you laughed because I just blurted it out without even thinking."
That's so funny. I I had a friend the other day. This was around some other people, and we were sitting there. I found out he's getting a divorce, and so I was like, he'd announced it to the group of us, and I was like, "Well, man, you doing all right?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's not like I'm gonna get all sad about it and shoot myself in the face or anything." And like people having that sense of humor though is like my favorite when people don't walk on eggshells around you. And I would like for you, I guess I don't know if people were walking around eggshells around you at that point. I mean, was that a new experience for you to have people actually treating you like a normal dude again, or no?
Well, like I said, he was embarrassed because he didn't know me that well at the time. He
Okay.
did that just slipped out, and but we've had these conversations before. I personally usually try to cut a joke or do something to lighten the air when I'm around people that I have never been around a blind person or who are around me for the first time to let them know, hey, you just talk to me. I'm cool. I if I find humor in life, it makes it easier. So, to begin with, like I said, people did tiptoe around, and they'd say, "Did you listen to television the other day?" I'm like, "You mean did I watch TV?"
Yeah.
And yeah, like we've talked. When you talk around it, you identify it.
Yeah,
You
and then it
know,
makes it weird. So,
yeah, and it makes it weird. So just talk normal,
but
and then naturally we'll rib each other. Or if we know the person, we'll rib them, and yeah.
yeah.
So
But with these houses, I mean, this is you're doing 14 years of this, and I know, when you were thinking that whole or talking through your Aunt Donna, kind of putting in the good word for you, I was sitting here waiting for for you to say that like Tim came back into the picture because I know that asshole pushed you off a roof at some point too.
no, he didn't. But his nephew walked me off a roof, and I broke my pelvic bones.
Oh, I thought it was him because I always
No,
thought like
no, it was his
Dick
nephew.
Cheney came back for round two.
No, no, no. But that's something else I laugh about too. You remember that when this cracked me up. This is a comment you made whenever I said, one of the coolest things I can say was I was never the slightest bit angry or bitter at him, and I said, we're still really really good friends to this day, which we are. And you said, yeah, I'm kind of good friends with the guy that shot me too.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I
I do
cracked up on that
remember
one.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, it's
Important
good that
to
you're good friends with yourself.
it's important to be able to giggle about these things. But
Yeah.
so I guess why when because you said that was 14 years, so I'm guessing that timeline kind of lines up with you starting to get into adaptive sports. Is that why you stopped doing
Yes.
Okay. And
Yeah.
I know you haven't
Well,
totally stopped because you do it some now. Like I've called you before and I'm like, hey man, what's up? And you're like, oh, I'm rewiring my kitchen or it's something crazy. But yeah.
yeah. It overlapped there for quite a bit for a while. 'Cause like I said, I didn't get into it to begin with. They both overlapped for a good little while, and today, as a matter of fact, I was over tearing down the pole barn. I've been uh, tearing down a 32 by 56 pole barn, and I've done probably 70% of it by myself. I you know got up there, loosened all the metal, and shoved it down to people on the ground, and then I had 8 trusses. There's on 8-foot centers. I I flipped 4 of them by myself, completely by myself. Took the purlins off, flipped them over using this rope system, and then got them on the ground. And I was out there today taking side purlins, walking around the side purlins, getting them down. So now I'm just down to the posts are sticking up out of the ground. So tomorrow, hopefully, I'll go over there and 50 mile of ground, it's done. So
Is that out
then
on your dad's property where we
no,
were
no, coal
cutting?
mine. The coal mine
Okay.
had bought some property back here, and they were just going to end up demolishing it and the home, and I got permission to tear it down and possibly going to rebuild it here at my house. And so now,
Oh,
once I get this
nice.
done, I'm kind of doing that in conjunction with remodeling a neighbor's bathroom in an older home. So I've got the bathroom gutted and got to repair some floor joists and
Joe's gonna make you store a bunch
put
of
it down.
boats out there in that pole barn. You know he is. You're gonna be like the midway point in the country for storing boats for Team River Runner.
Yeah, there you go.
When
Yeah,
when you got started doing all that, the construction stuff, because like when I was at blind rehab, they give you like a topic talking tape measure and the click ruler and things like that. But it's not like there's there's not many blind people out there doing the level of carpentry that you do. Was any of this stuff, or really even now, is much of that stuff even adaptive or, talking technology?
yeah. When I first started doing it, like I said, I was doing construction for how many years before I went up there, and so um, yeah, I was doing this home building for like 7, 8 years before I went up to the blind rehab center. No, what would it have been? It would have been exactly like 6 years, I guess. When I finally got a click ruler, talking tape measure, and a beeping level, what a game changer. What an absolute game changer because we were just building jigs, so that I could, they'd cut, say, like one board to the length of, making all what they call cripples and for door headers and, for king studs and, whatever length for all the windows and stuff and headers. And they'd just cut one jig and then I'd just butt it up to the saw blade, the jig, lay the board I'm going to cut, I guess, underneath it, and then go flush the other end.
Yeah.
And I just sit there and cut them like that. I just, and which sometimes still is sometimes faster than measuring every piece with the talking tape measure, but it's this way of doing it. And then, when I first started learning how to drive a nail with a hammer, uh, I smashed the living crap out of my fingers and thumbs. Just, you know, I don't until I finally got it, and I'll not forget the girl standing out there, they called it a banger, when I was little. Says, once I started just driving nails, I just go there and practice, get a old piece of wood, just drive nails, drive nails. Once I started pounding them just good, the girl said, "Hey, you got a good banger there, don't you, Dad?" So, and,
Banger? I
a
hardly know
banger
her.
instead of a hammer. Yeah, good banger. And
Man,
so,
that's
yeah,
it's hilarious to me, like thinking of you just having these like a little flock of child-sized penguins following you around, just
yeah,
chirping at all this crazy shit you're doing. And also them growing up and not realizing like
yeah,
that's not normal for a blind person to be doing all this stuff.
yeah. It's kind of funny, quite frankly. To begin with, all the adults were the ones that were saying, "No, no, no, we'll do that line. Just get away." And the girls were the ones that were constantly, I'd want to come up with an idea. They'd help me find stuff and figure it out and do things. And then that's when the adults really came on board and started helping me. Like I said, Bug helped me, mow around the barn, and they helped me, figure out where the tools was, so I could go change the spark plugs and the oil filters and brakes on the automobiles like I always did. And finally, the adults are the one finally got on board, and
Yeah.
um,
Do you
was these,
feel, because your grandkids are about, or at least some of them are about that age now,
yeah,
right? Like,
absolutely,
does that bring any of that back? I know there's not anyone thinking that there's anything holding you back now or anything to hold you back from now, but does that bring you back at all?
it does some, yeah, it does a little bit because it's kind of funny. And just like I think every grandparent, I'm more protective of the grandkids, I think, than I was my own kids. But
Really?
yeah, but I did have them out here, the other day. Had them out here with a hammer and a little pry bar. I had some stuff here that I needed to separate and take trim out of, and they were beating on it and busting on it, and I was showing them how to properly use a little flat bar and the hammer and how to use a screw grind. And my grandson, they're 3 and 8. You know, so had the one of them had the hammer and the other had the screw gun, and my granddaughter same way. Is out here. Then so yeah, and always packing. Like I said, got all the purlins down off that building there today, and there's a couple of guys just helping me come over to help me load them and bring them over here to the house, and there's some nails sticking in. And I just told them, I said, every one of the boards that have nails sticking in them, send them over here. I want to drive them back so I don't have to worry about stepping on them, pull them out. And so they started putting them over to me, and I just driving these nails back. I didn't miss any, and they just stopped all of a sudden. I could tell it because they stopped and they're just watching me do it, and because these particular guys, never seen me do this before, and then once I finally got them drove back, they started moving the boards again. But there's this,
They wanted to see.
yeah, this
Yeah.
is pros, yeah. So
Well, I mean, it's even, I know you, and I still feel like if I could, I would want to watch that and be like, how's this motherfucker doing that?
yeah,
But,
I had a video crew come out and video me on uh, as I was rolling one of those trusses, so a little bit. So I don't know what they're going to do with it or anything, but I tried to
oh,
do some kind of Facebook post on it, film myself, but yeah, the thing about it is I'm so fortunate to have the opportunity to do this stuff, just to go do it. And quite frankly, the truss is my dad. He told me, he said, I'm not going to help you on the roof. I'm not going to be out there. And he said, you're going to have to hire it done. And I'm like, challenge accepted.
even now, you're in your 50s and you're like, all right, Dad, hold my beer.
Yeah, challenge accepted. Yeah, I'm not hiring this done. So
Yeah, so like you say you're fortunate enough to be able to do it, but like you're creating that opportunity for yourself, man. You're incredibly humble and I love that about you, but like give yourself some credit.
yeah, there's a Navy vet named David Mickelson. He's a bilateral amputee, missing one leg above the knee and one below the knee. And he made 3 statements. He said, life is not a spectator sport. You have to get engaged. And every single day you wake up, you have to figure out how to challenge yourself. And to me, the most profound thing he said was the last thing he said, you cannot sit around and wait on silver linings. You have to create them.
Mm.
So, I mean, as you well know, I have a support system that's unbelievable. Unbelievable. And I know how fortunate I am for that. I do not take it for granted at all. Um, but I think that's why I've been given so much. I think that's why it's so important for me to give back. Like I said, particularly on that first Grand Canyon trip, I remember, I think I probably wrote this in a book, but it's so true. When we're sitting at camp the last night on the river, all those other guys and gals, these disabled vets, they were congratulating me, saying, hey, congratulations, you're the first one to ever do this. And I was like, no. I said, you guys, you're wrong. I said, we were the first ones to do this. And it's absolutely meaningless and irrelevant, even though that's cool to say, I have to admit, but it's absolutely meaningless and irrelevant if we can't pay it forward. And that's just what it is to me, is, you know, uh, the gifts, the blessings I've been bestowed on me. That's, like I said, that's why what you were talking about earlier in the conversation. That's why it's my next duty, something, my next mission to create other opportunities, to have conversations with this, who knows how many people, and hopefully let them realize they have value, they have purpose, they have worth, and they still can do so much more than they think they can. And that's all
And
of
you
us.
have, yeah, you've had that impact on so many people, man. When I go anywhere that I go that is blindness related with other blind vets, like everybody knows you. All of us have somehow gotten our foot in the door into adaptive sports via you, or maybe, it was their blind rehab center was like, hey, we need to talk to Lottie. Like that was how I got connected with you.
Well, no.
I went to the same blind rehab center that you did, and I met the lady. I met Melissa Winters, and she's like, "What do you like to do?" I'm like, well, when I could see, I like to ride motorcycles and do all this other stuff. And she's like, "I have somebody that you need to talk to." And then I proceeded to dodge your phone calls. I don't know if you remember that,
Oh
but
yeah.
yeah, I didn't realize I wasn't in a good spot, but I wasn't in a good spot and I was dodging your phone calls, but eventually you made it happen. But you've had that for so many people, and I don't know if you remember what that's like. And even then, it was in a different capacity for you when you did get introduced, because it wasn't, like you kind of stumbled across it later on.
Mhm.
Like for me, that those opportunities were a lifeline. It not just, I mean, that first one was huge because of our conversation that first night at the table. I mean, I will never forget that conversation, but also getting back on a snowboard was the first taste of independence that I had, because at that point, like, yes, I knew how to microwave an egg so that it would then be technically a scrambled egg, and how to open an email on my computer, but like that was really it. Like, and so even though I couldn't do all this stuff for myself, like it's like, I can still snowboard. Like I'm chasing this. I'm doing more of this. And then it was, I mean, that first year was just like back to back to back trips because I had nothing else. And in the time in between, I was looking forward to more of those trips, because now again, I was like getting my fix where in addition to the independence and everything else, and just being able to do the things that I used to love, like then being in that environment around other people who have been through this. And
Mhm.
it's so, I mean, even, it's interesting because there is a relatively small group of us that, and I'm going to say use the word we here lightly, because us doing these adaptive sports things, the most of us is nothing. It doesn't hold a candle to the crazy shit that you do. But there's a relatively small group of us that do that stuff, that the more normal adaptive stuff. And when it does seem like whenever I run into someone new, it is like, yeah, I'm here. I met Lonnie. Lonnie, you guys know Lonnie? And we're all like, yeah, we know Lonnie. That's how we got here. And it's just,
It's just, but the cool thing, several things within that now is it's not, we know Lonnie anymore. I mean, so many of you guys are doing that, and which is awesome. That you see so many of you guys reaching out and paying it forward as well. And then something else I kind of want to add into the fact there is you talked about being so busy that first year, is that was intentional on my behalf and is
yeah,
always intentional on my behalf, because I truly do believe that the sooner you can get somebody and try to pick them up and put them back on their feet, the better the chances are of doing so. And, if you can get them back with 6 months, 1 year, instead of 7 or 8 years down the road,
14.
that seems
Yeah.
like the longer it goes without them doing something, the darker that, the deeper in the well they go. But then also, I think, like I said, intentionally is, I think that if you send somebody to do something like, well, like if we just had you go snow ski and left it there, that euphoria high is awesome, but the fall on the backside is worse than where you were at initially, unless you have something else to kind of be looking forward to. So that's why, like I said, I'm so fortunate to have been connected with, so many different organizations and that do so many different things that, when I get someone new, I try to, okay, let's send you, skiing this month, and okay, and then we'll send you hiking this month, and let's go hunting or fishing this month, and then We're going to go cycling that month and kayaking that month and rock climbing this month. And, when you can see all these different things that you can still do, then I think it helps you realize, okay, I can, I can still do things. And
Yes, and I, I think there are a couple things you said there. Like one, definitely. I mean, I still even now, when I go on these on trips, it's a lot less frequently now. I'm busy and I got a lot of stuff going on. And I'm when I'm coming home, I'm excited to come home and get back to work and get back to the gym and get back to jujitsu. But I still get sad when I come home. Like there's still, but it was early on when there was nothing really to come home to. It was that is a real. I mean, it like hits you like fuck. I'm still all right. I still
blind.
this is still my world, and
Yeah.
yeah, and just it is that yes, I'm blind, but at that point it's that what that really is underneath is you haven't figured out how to do anything yet. But I think the other side of that is like you mentioned, having that letting people see that early on so that they don't fall into a darker place. The other side of that, and I've seen the other side of this, is there are people who lean into letting people do things for them instead of saying, no, I'm
Yes.
going to figure this out. And that
Yeah.
is fucking dangerous. Those people that
Yes.
I've met are just, whether it's through their own willing choice that they were conscious of, there's lazy people out there that are like that, or if it was just they kind of got that ingrained into them through not having been exposed to these opportunities. That is like a toxic little scenario to fall into when you're that person. And I don't know how you come back from that either, even if you're not in a mentally dark place. So I think it's just as impactful on that front.
I agree. Totally, totally, totally agree with you. And, and I think, well, just thinking about like where you're at now, I remember having you down here at the house and you going out in the woods and swinging an axe and helping me and my dad dig out tree stumps and roots.
Yeah.
And you're like, I haven't done this before. And like, okay, so what? Here, swing it. Here's an axe. That's just like,
Yeah.
and you got it.
And
But
then
I think this adaptive sports stuff catches people's attention and it's just fun to do and cool to do, but it's the everyday stuff that I think resonates. The fact that, like I said, I'm out here push mowing, I'm using the chainsaw, I'm doing this stuff around the houses, working on the cars, coaching my daughter's softball teams and helping with their with basketball teams and teaching them how to shoot and how to hunt and how to drive and how to cook and how to, uh, it's that, and for me, now I'm leaning back on you guys. Okay, how in the world do you use this stupid iPhone? What do you do with this thing? Hey Zach,
yeah, even now you're like, dude, I don't have a computer. I
yeah,
don't use a computer.
yeah, yeah. But it's like, I'm going to you guys now to teach me all this other stuff that is just secondhand, everyday stuff to you guys. And but to be honest with you, I sit here at the house and I just smile, and I truly do. I just think how fortunate am I that these people came into my life to see you guys just soar and excel and you know lead the path for us. It's not me leading for you; it's you leading it now for us, and
But
and uh,
we're like
and for me.
chasing. Go ahead.
But no, that's what it is. I mean, truly. I mean, you guys are leading the path for me now, and it's cool. It's awesome.
We're all chasing like recreating what you've done and like paying that forward though. Like when Mike Murphy and I talk, it's like there it is explicit conversations about like we want to do what Lonnie is doing and has done for other people, and it shouldn't have to be Lonnie doing all of this. And like that's I know you don't see that that side of it, but this is I mean that is you have brought that to fruition. And yeah, there's agency on the individual to take that and run with it. And these are, the little, connect the dots points to keep them afloat while they are starting to reestablish their new normal, which I think is seems like maybe what you were talking about with like it's
Yeah,
these more like day-to-day things because having that new
yeah,
normal is very important. But
yeah.
like you've cultivated this beautiful thing that you're able to now look back on, man. And I hope you
I'm just a
realize
small
that.
cog, man. Yeah, I appreciate it, but I'm just a small cog in it. I mean, there's just like I said, you and Mike and Steve Baskus, and I could just keep going down the list of people that are doing the same thing and doing it more, which, like I said, puts a smile on my face. To you guys are you taking it to another level, and that's just awesome. And uh, humbling to me as well. To like I said, to be blessed enough to be in your guys' circle and to be a part of your guys' lives. And it's yeah, there's I look at I think of like Marlene, Lily and Shantine. I mean, I could just name person after person after person that is just doing incredible things out there. I'm just a small part of this. So anyway, but I appreciate it.
It really is a neat. I mean, the crew, that core crew that there is that I said
Hmm.
like that I touched on in kind of saying like, the core crew that you typically run into on rotation on these events for blind veterans really is it's like it's all remarkable people. I mean,
Yeah.
I just ran into Sheldon Ponder and
Yep.
up in Steamboat, and I ran into him on my first trip. This would have been in Jan or first steamboat trip, so it would have been second ski trip. So it would have been like January of 2020. And I got up there to Steamboat here a couple weeks ago and I heard his voice and I was like, I was like, I know that voice. I was like, are you Shelton? And like we're connecting with it and just man, you pick his brain on what his life has been like and even just I mean, you go him, Brian O'Connell to name some other people that
Hmm.
like you haven't mentioned, Joey Martinez, like there's all
Joey.
just
Yeah.
Jesus Christ,
Danny.
man.
AJ.
Danny and Ken, yeah, these
I mean,
fucking
like I said, just
turds,
yeah,
yeah. Vince Fees out there, just
yeah,
yeah. There's Brian Harris, like
yeah.
it really is.
Yeah, you hate to throw names out there because you're going to forget somebody.
Yeah, that's why I keep going, and now I
Yeah,
feel bad. I'm like, fuck.
yeah,
But
yeah. Slade called me up and say, "Dirtbag, you forgot me." So,
yeah, so we're gonna stop saying names. I'm gonna say
yeah,
that we lost connection here for a second, and then so sorry if you got if you got left out.
yeah,
I do. I want to kind of I figured we would end up just bullshitting for a lot of this, but I do want to have a chance to discuss some of these. I mean, especially the Grand Canyon. I know you touched on it some, Everest, and then what you just did down at the South Pole. I mean, people literally like they aren't experiencing it live because I'd recorded that episode a month before it got released, but I mean, we heard in real time of you making it to the South Pole and just I mean, the Grand Canyon is world renowned. That's what 300 is it 326 or 327?
226,
Two
226 miles.
okay, 226 miles that people die on every year. You were the first blind person to do that. And when I say kayaking, like you're kayaking in your own kayak. There's no one else there. You're being guided audibly by people. You made it through that, and have now a bunch of other blind vets have done it, and you've like obviously paved the way for that to happen. And even with your book, I meant to touch on this earlier. I wanted to touch on this so that people can support you and Team River Runner, but not be giving money to this company that fucking stole your book from you. Before we move on here, Lonnie's book, when when this book was written and published, basically the publisher, all of the proceeds were supposed to go to Team River Runner, and the publisher has kept every cent of that money since the book was released. It's an incredible book and it's a great read. I've read it twice. I never read books twice. I knew you already, but when I read it both times, but if they can support you, I want or Team River Runner to reach out to Team River Runner directly or you
You know,
for speaking engagements. But as you make it down the Grand Canyon and you've been able to help so many other blind vets do it now, which is just insane. I don't and again, these other Zambezi and these other rivers around the world, which I'm pretty sure, didn't you say when you kayaked Zambezi that there were crocodiles in the river?
yeah, there's a few little ones there where it was
It's
at. Nothing major, so where I was at. But
some
yeah,
20-foot long crocodiles, just dinosaurs waiting for the blind man to fall in the water.
yeah, the section I was in, there wasn't, yeah, like too many. When if they get too big, they get rid of them because that's a very touristy section of the river, so they don't want people getting ate alive by crocs, So
Get you a nice pair of
yeah,
boots over in
yeah,
near the Zambezi River.
yeah.
Yeah.
I will never personally recommend a blind person do that section of the river. Yeah, because that's compared to the Grand Canyon is very forgiving, and for the most part, I mean things can happen for sure, but comparatively, um, yeah, there's no comparison. Zambezi's a whole lot harder. And,
Well, you had a close call there, didn't you? I think you wrote about that in
yeah,
your book.
a couple of them. Yeah, yeah, I didn't that went in the book, so I didn't get it. Didn't
Okay.
yeah, yeah, that was after that. So
Well,
yeah,
let's move into Everest then, because like first of all, again, there's all this shit that a bunch of you guys do. Like you with Everest. I'm like, man, I'm so glad you did it. And I love that you did it. And I'm proud of you for doing it. But god damn, that does not appeal to me whatsoever. And like especially I mean, it was what a 2 month ordeal or
yeah,
something like that. And but
just about. Yeah,
the risks associated with it for you get up there and you can't even see that you're at the top of the world. I mean, for you, or so I want to kind of hear what it was like. I know you've told me personally, but I'm also curious. I don't think I've ever asked you like the impetus there for you to do that. Is that because that's a I think that's a I mean,
that's
it's
a big
definitely a hard
word,
thing.
man.
Oh, it's definitely a hard thing for like me to comprehend. Like, why the fuck would you want to do that? Like
It was
for
never, it was never, it was never on my radar. I had no desire to do it. Matter of fact, I remember telling people I would never do it. But yeah,
so what changed?
uh, twist my arm in a way. I went down with Steve to climb Aconcagua in South America, and while I was down there, a guy by the name of Michael Neal stuck his head in the tent and said, "Hey, you guys are blind, aren't you?" It's like, "Yeah, we are." Well, now let's fast forward a few months, and I was on the telephone with Don, the executive director of the BVA, Overton, Don Overton. And, he's kind of like, Lonnie, next time you do something kind of out there, how about joining with the BVA to help bring awareness to the BVA, to the association? And it's like, okay, sure. But, I didn't have nothing planned at the time, but it's like, sure. And so 3 days after that conversation with Don, I get a phone call from Michael, who's sitting over at Everest Base Camp. Michael Neal, the guy that's and he said, Lonnie, him and Brian said, Lonnie, how about climbing Mount Everest? And it just flashed back to the conversation, helped bring awareness to the BVA. And I just lowered my head and took a deep breath and said, okay. Said, if we can figure out a way to do it, I'm in. And that's kind of how it started. And that's really what it was. It's just, so yeah, that's,
That is so wide. And you're like,
yeah.
yeah, I guess I'll climb Everest then. I guess I kind of have. I guess.
It's like, yeah, okay, this needs to be done. But yeah.
Was it
Yeah,
like a
I think about that. Sorry, I keep stepping on you. Go ahead. What's your question?
no, you go for it, dude.
Yeah, I, it's like I said, I think about Everest, and uh, I remember when I got back down, I told the guys, I said, I'll never climb it again. I said, you could offer me $1 million and I'd never climb it again. And they were like, yeah, right. Obviously, he said, you obviously don't know what $1 million is. And I said, yeah, I think I got it. I said, I don't have it, but I got a concept of what it would do to help change my life and stuff. But I said, you guys don't get it. I said, the reason I've done this is done. I could never dig deep enough within me to keep pushing myself back up that mountain again. Because I mean, the whole time, man, unfortunately, the year that we did it, 2023 was the deadliest year in the history of the climbing season. And they said the coldest and windiest in like 30 years, massive frostbite. And like 18 people died, I believe.
Well,
But,
you
as you
saw one of them,
saw three of them,
but like you saw one of them pre-death, and then he was dead on the way
saw
back down.
three of them pre-death.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah.
And
And
like if I remember correctly, like I mean, you knew they were dying when you passed them.
the one I did, yeah, the
Okay.
one I definitely knew. I knew was dying whenever it passed. The other ones, I found out died, but that wouldn't come to find out, they was carrying this one young lady off the mountain, and she was just the porters were carrying her. She was just completely talking out of her head, and then past this other person that was stuck on this head wall, to get up there, and they they won't move, they won't talk to you, and the porter said they've been stuck there for like 4 hours. Come to find out, they died, and it's like, yeah. And then the one that you're specifically talking about was on the summit day. And yeah, that was brutal. You saw him struggling on the way up and coming down. It was in the final stages of his life. And yeah, I felt so bad, not only for him, but for the porters who were doing everything they could to potentially try to get him down that mountain, and just couldn't make it. So
And then that's another body that gets left up there, which is so
yeah,
insane to think that like that is. I mean, there's no way to get them up off there because if you risk getting their body off there, then you're gonna die.
yeah. Yeah, in some cases they do try to get them down if they can. I mean, you got to pay big dollars, just for that, and sign waivers in some cases beforehand. But yeah, but for the most part, especially up above Camp 3, above 23,000 feet, a lot of people are left up there. And but I just think, like I said, I think about that on the climb, and the days you're just sitting there waiting for a weather window, just hoping you get a weather window that'll permit you to try to climb it, and knowing that you might get up there and get stuck in the weather, that's telling you to turn around, and going through the Khumbu icefall, all these crevasses that you got to cross, and just crevasse after crevasse after crevasse, and some with ladders, some without ladders, and the time, and not be able to take a step. And a couple of times, my foot slipped, and like one time especially, it kind of broke through under my foot, and my ribs just crashed down over this ice chunk, and and then you're going through the Khumbu Icefall, where the seracs, which is just huge chunks of ice and rock, are pushed up because the glacier's moving in that area. And that's the first three people that were killed that year, was when one of those seracs fell over on them and buried them, and their bodies were never recovered. And you're thinking about all of this as you're going up through there and just struggling to find footage. It's taken me in some places, twice as long to get through as it does a sighted person. And, then going up, and I remember going from camp, sitting at Camp 2, and, if the helicopter goes above Camp 2, they can static line somebody off, up just slightly above Camp 3. But if it goes above Camp 2, it's not good. And they were literally telling me, at times, well, that person's clipped by their ankles. So, if they're clipped by their ankles, they're not alive. If they're upright, they're alive. And you're thinking, I'm going up there. And then from Camp 2 to Camp 3, we go up to Slotsy Face, and on one of my acclimation hikes up there, we had a rock fall occur above us, and one of the rocks went right between my arms and tip to tip of my nose, hit the top of my right boot, and just crushed in the top of my right boot and cracked it. And I thought it broke my
Jeez.
foot, and but that's just an acclimation hike. So, you got to go up there and do it again. And then you
And
go ahead.
well, like I want to get people that aren't going to realize, and I can't do this justice because I haven't done something crazy like that, but when you are completely blind and you're doing these things, whether it's hiking, because when we hike, we do it solo with like a pair of trekking poles and you just feel the path around, or when you're skiing and you're following sound and reacting to everything as opposed to being proactive to seeing that a bump is coming, or in the same thing in a kayak, it's okay, I know the rapids are coming, but then I'm getting hit and I'm just reacting and feeling everything and listening to everything. It is so mentally exhausting.
Yeah,
Now
absolutely.
you've got no air and you're climbing a mountain and with all this heavy gear on and everything else on top of all that, and it's taking you twice as long.
Yeah, yeah,
And then the ominous death looming overhead.
yeah. It is. It's my summit push. Like I said, from Camp Ford, normal round trip for sighted peoples in the 10 to 12 hour range. It took us 21 hours. And like I said, passing people as they're coming back down. That I made it to. They're telling you I made it to within 500 vertical feet. My eyelids froze shut, and then you pass people that didn't have a struggle at all with it, and but then these other people are struggling and turning around due to this or that and the other, and about 4 hours from the summit from me, 750 vertical feet. My oxygen mask, my supplemental oxygen mask, didn't started working improperly, and so the whole last 750 feet, 4 hours for me took. I couldn't take a full easy breath, and when I got to the summit, the one of the Sherpas traded masks with me, and he said I can't get his mask to work either, and he bailed down the mountain, and he let me use his, and um, but all that crap, just and that's why I still was telling him, like I said, I couldn't dig deep enough because when all thinking about all those people, the helicopters, the crevasses, the rock slide, mask filling, and quite frankly, all I could think about was you guys and the people that believed in me, like my aunt to give me a chance to build a house, the people that sponsored this trip, the other people that are watching, disabled or not disabled. It was the 22nd of May, so close to Memorial Day. This was going through my head, the sacrifices that give me the opportunity to be here. I was just literally cussing myself. Just take another step, Lonnie. Take a step, wait 15, 20 seconds, take a step, and just take another blanking step. I was literally cussing myself. Just take another step, and yeah, and that's why I said I couldn't. You know, climbing this mountain wasn't for me. It truly wasn't, and I fight back tears thinking about it. But I hope people truly realize. I mean, I count the blessings that I was given to be given the opportunity to even attempt it, and that's like I said, too many people sacrificed way too much for me not to give it everything that I can. And that's why this stuff is so important to me. And that's why I feel so blessed to be able to, like I said, have the opportunity to even try. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Well, and you're doing it, man. You just did it with the South Pole. You got two summits left, and then you've done them all, which is
yeah,
that's seven summits that sound like, again, nothing, something I want absolutely nothing to do with.
yeah,
But I love that you have done it. And I know, I mean, I think we're at like an, um, I want to start trying to wrap this up here because I think we're
okay.
getting close to an hour and a half. And it takes me 4 or 5 times as long to edit as
Oh, I
the
can only
episode
imagine.
length.
Yeah,
So, but I know, I'm sure some people are dying to know that I've heard other people talk about this before, and I believe Joe Mornini mentioned it on our episode when we were talking about you. Do you have an interest in getting on Dancing with the Stars? And what do we need to do to make that happen if you are?
That's a pipe dream for me, dude. Absolutely. You know, I have an interest in getting on. I would absolutely love to get on Dancing with the Stars and have no clue how to go about it, man. Absolutely
I,
no clue. I got to be a star first. So,
Yeah, I'm so
yeah,
glad you answered like that because I tell people all the time, I'm like, I talk about you and then I'm like, and he's always in overalls and he's always dancing. And they're like, oh, well, like he's dance. Yeah, sure, he's dancing. I'm like, no, this dude boogies, man. Like I've been trying to get him to teach me because everywhere we go, you find ladies and then you're like, all right, we're dancing. And I'm like, I need to, if for nothing else, I need it for that. No.
yeah, yeah.
But
If I could only dance half as good as Joey, then I might be all right. So,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. If I could get a set of overalls like yours with an ass flap on there to show off my donk a little bit, I'd be golden.
yeah.
But I,
Well, you got to learn some more languages too, because like I said, I speak four languages, three fluently, one not so good. But yeah,
what are the other three languages that you speak?
I speak hick, hillbilly, and redneck fluently, and a
In
little bit of
English.
English.
Yeah, that checks out. Somehow though, man, I mean, I've heard you speak in front of crowds. You are even when it's off the cuff and like we're rolling out of an event and you're thanking everybody, you are an incredible speaker. And as people can hear, there's stories behind all this stuff. And I'm hoping that out of this, some people reach out to you to hear you speak. Where can they do that?
They can literally just reach out to my website. There's a link on there, a little form they can fill out, and gives their information. They ask where, when, what time,
Cool.
what your theme is, what your topic is, and you know, put in their email, phone, and we'll definitely get back to you. So
Okay. I'll have links to that.
LonnieBedwell.com. Yeah.
There we go. That's what I was going to ask. I'll have links to that in the show notes. What else? You got anything else you want to share?
Uh, nah, just knowing just everybody out there is don't ever question your value, your worth, your importance, and you know it's it's there. Every single one of us has this unique set of gifts, this basket of gifts that no one else has, and that's what makes us all so valuable. And believe me, it's yeah.
And this
So
the
go
road
ahead.
to finding that or rediscovering that, like, I talk about it as I had to refine my purpose and really refine my identity. And, for you, it was your value. Like it's not always a smooth path, right? Like that's if you're struggling with that because you hear incredible stories like Lonnie's, you got to remember there was 14 years there where, I mean, that's not even fair to say. I was going to say 14 years there where you were struggling. You were getting after it, but there was a time there early on as you were figuring things
Absolutely.
out that you were struggling. And it just, unfortunately, part of the game, but that's also as cliche as this is to say, that is what gives you the ability to be thankful for when you do have it, whether
Yeah.
that be again or for the first time. And
I will throw this out there. I would like to throw this out there a little bit, I guess. Like you just said it, every one of us has struggles, adversity. We all go through adversity, big, small, whatever. And I think the key to it is to break it down. Zach, I'm this acronym guy, but the ADVERSITY. The hardest part about adversity is always the A into the D, acknowledging and sometimes accepting the differences and the difficulties. I don't care who you are. Don't compare. It's happening to you. It's real. Whatever it is, just simply start acknowledging it. And once you acknowledge, okay, hey, here I am. This stinks. It's hard. But once you get to that but, then it empowers you to do the VER. Visualize every route you can take. And then it gives you the S, what my daughters told me, the strength to stand up, the strength to step, to wear the ITY into your future, that life you can live, that differences you can make, all of that. But it starts with the A.
And I guess I do have one more thing I want to ask you after you saying that. I talk about this in a mental health capacity a lot because that's what I know, but reaching out for help. It's that, yes, that can save your life if you're a person who's struggling with depression, but in your, I mean, I know I've seen your community. I know you have this incredible flock of people behind you. Was that in your to fit in with that framework? And where does asking for help play into that?
Mm-hmm. You've heard me talk about the three, I call them emotions, the three things I think that hold every human being back more than any is foolish pride, fear, and pity. There's nothing wrong with being proud of some of the things you do and who you are. But pride becomes foolish when you cannot humble yourself to ask for a hand up, not a hand out, a hand up, because there's not a single human being walking the face of this earth that has ever gotten to where they're at in life without somebody, multiple somebodies, helping them, teaching them, guiding them along the way. Nobody. Nobody can do it all. And, that foolish pride sometimes leads into that fear, the FEAR, like false evidence about reality. Well, they're going to think I'm weak if I ask for help. They're going to think I'm weak if I can't do it on my own, or if or they're going to think they're just going to make fun of me, or they're going to, or I might get hurt, or I might not succeed, or I might, whatever, it's not true. It's not true. Most people, kids sometimes maybe when they're young before they learn, but adults, they want to help. They truly do. And it makes them feel good a lot of times to help and to give you that hand up. Like I said, the hand up, not a hand out. And especially if we're going to do something. And then that all leads into the worst one of all, I think, is the pity, the PITY. Poor information to yourself. I'm blind. I'm not a man. I'm useless. I'm worthless. I'm bull crap.
That's a victim mentality.
That's a victim mentality. And like you said, I don't care if you're the caregiver, if you're the person that's in it, pity is harmful. Compassion is one thing. There's absolutely nothing wrong, absolutely everything right with having compassion for others. But pity is crippling. When you don't sometimes force yourself to have tough love for those others, not all the time, don't misunderstand me, but yet, or force yourself to have tough love for yourself, or that it's, yeah, like I said,
Yeah. You
blind.
did.
I'm blind. I have never lost my vision. For me personally, I lost eyesight. I gained vision. Our true vision's within us. Heart, mind, soul, spirit. That's where our true vision's at. Eyesight's a function of it. Very important, but yet just a function of it. So anyway, sorry.
No, dude, that was beautifully said. I'm glad we were able to touch on it. I feel like that's a perfect way to kind of put the bow on it and just leave people with something to think about, especially there's probably going to be a lot of blind people listening to this, right? Like it's someone needs to hear that. And thank you for taking the time. I'm so proud of you. Like I said, I talk about you all the time. I write about you in my book. I just I'm thankful for you. I'm so glad that I know you. I love you. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, brother. Yeah, all that goes right back to you and everyone out there. And yeah, together, what can we not do? So
Yes,
yeah,
sir.
love you, man.
And Thank you, everyone at home, for listening to another episode of Going In Blind.